he and his wife sat across from each other in silence that morning. And as he looked down at his cup of coffee, he just saw it swirl around the cup and just trying to get those last few minutes before the kids were awake and the chaos started. Everything had been packed the night before, meticulously packed. Every plan thought through, every contingency, every what if thought through. They had everything they needed for this trip. And his wife looked at him and said, I don't know what to do. Do you think we can do this? And he says, I don't know. We don't really have another choice. We're all out of options. And so he stared at the coffee, and he knew as soon as he finished that last sip, he'd have to go wake his boy, and they'd have to get going on their journey and leave their house, leave their family, and start making that trip. And like all good moms, she say, hey, did you pack that? And he goes, yeah, I did. What about yeah, I got it. We're good. She says, do you think he can help? I said, I don't know. But if half the things that they're saying about him are true, and man, they're saying even the guys that follow him can handle things like our boy is going through. We're out of options. And so he woke his boy, grabbed their packs, and they headed out the door. They followed the North Sea shore all the way around, didn't get too close to the water. Water was dangerous for his boy. You got to keep an eye on him, just in case. If he had another one of his episodes and no one was around, who knows what would happen. So as they made their way across the North Shore and down, they headed towards the hills. They had heard that he was there. The teacher was there. They would have to go find him. And sure enough, they found a group of men standing around and women standing around. He says, hey, is this the rabbi's group? He says, yes. Well, where's the rabbi? He's been gone. He's up a mountain. And the father looked at him and said, I need help. My boy. He's got an impure spirit. And I don't know what to do. And I said, well, Jesus isn't here, but we've done this before. And I don't know who it was out of the 9 that were left there while Jesus went up on the hill. I don't know who stepped forward, but somebody said, I got this. And he looked at the boy and said, I command you to come out. And nothing happened. I imagine that poor disciple just, I command you to come out. They had done this before. Jesus gave them this power. They had cast out demons. They had done this. But it wasn't working. And I could see another disciple say, you're not doing it right. You didn't say it right. You got to find out its name. You got to say, demon, I command you to come out. That's how you got to do it. Another guy tries and it doesn't happen. And the father's just sitting there, getting more and more frustrated. And about this time, the religious leaders that are standing around, they start looking at the disciples and mocking them. Maybe he didn't say please. Maybe you got to be polite about it. Maybe the rabbi isn't all that people are saying he is. And pretty soon the disciples are no longer helping the boy, they're defending themselves. And a fight just breaks out and they're yelling back and forth to each other. And then there's a commotion up the hill, the trail leading up the mountain. And the people flock to where that trailhead is. And they're yelling and they're screaming and they just hear a voice that says, what are you arguing about? And everyone stops. If you're just joining us, we are now almost 30 weeks in to the book of Mark. We're going to take a while on this, and we're only to chapter 9. If you have your Bibles or maybe your digital device, would you open up to Mark chapter 9 just to catch you up to where the story kicks off for us. Last week we talked about the transfiguration. There's a word that we don't exactly know what that means, but the gospel writers describe it in different ways. Matthew says that Jesus somehow appeared like the sun, like his face shone like the sun. Luke says he looked like lightning. And Mark says he looked like bleach. Not the best with words, right? He just glowed white. And then as they're standing there, Peter, James, and John, the only three that were allowed to come and see this, they see Jesus, they see him glowing, they see him being a lightning man right there, and they look at him. And Peter opens up his mouth and says, hey, it's good that we're here. Let's build a couple tents. Because also who had appeared there with Jesus was Moses and Elijah, the heroes of the faith. And Peter said, let's stay a while. And at that moment, Moses and Elijah disappear and just left Jesus standing, and a cloud comes and says, this is my son whom I love, listen to him. Then they head back down the mountain. And that's where our story picks up here. So if you're in Mark chapter 9, we're going to be starting in verse 14. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asks. So Jesus comes down the mountain, and the first thing that he comes into is an argument. And I would say some of our arguments, the things we get upset and frustrated about, seem pretty significant until Jesus is standing there, right? What beef do you have with somebody right now that if Jesus were looking at you and go, hey, what are you arguing about? You'd be like, oh, nothing, right? And you know this if you have a sibling or you're a parent of siblings, because you walk in the room, right? And you say, kids, what are you arguing about? And they're like, oh, hang on, right? Recalculating if this is worth it. And this is what's happening here. What are you arguing about? And so can I ask you, what thing in your life right now feels so significant that you're upset about with somebody, that you're frustrated about right now, that if Jesus were to sit there right with you and go, what are you arguing about? Would it still be as significant? Would it still be something you'd have an answer for? Or like them, when no one answers, would you just look at Jesus and, Look at verse 17. So a man in the crowd answered, teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit, and it's robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. And so I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they couldn't. So no one answers except for the Father. And the Father steps out of the crowd because no one has been able to fix this. The disciples have tried and they couldn't help. And so everyone's standing around looking at a seemingly impossible situation. In 2004, Adidas started a marketing campaign. Some of you are old enough with me, you remember this. Said impossible is what? Does anybody remember? Possible is nothing. They're using a Muhammad Ali quote, and they talk about that basically, if you have enough grit, enough determination, enough courage, enough will, maybe enough money, right? Anything is possible. But that's not what we're talking about here. This is an impossible situation. They couldn't fix just by sheer determination or willpower. The boy couldn't free himself. The father was completely helpless. This wasn't just difficult, this was impossible. And so look at verse 19. Jesus says, you unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. Everyone else had reached the end of what they could do, except for Jesus. Except for Jesus. So church, if you're taking notes this morning, maybe you're on a piece of paper or you're in our app where you can fill in the blanks on there, we're going to track and give you a couple takeaways from this message, from these verses. And the first one is bring the impossible to Jesus. That feels very much like a Sunday school answer, right? Where do you take the impossible things, kids, right? To Jesus, yeah. But so many of us spend all our time, all our energy, we worry about things because we try to control it. Anybody else ever feel like you're just on a hamster wheel? Because at least I'm doing something, right? But I'm worrying about it. There's a saying that says worrying is like a rocking chair. It takes a lot of energy but doesn't get you anywhere. And so we just sit and we worry and we worry. Have you brought it to Jesus? Have you brought the impossible thing to Jesus? What feels impossible in your life right now? How much time have you spent worrying about it versus how much time have you spent giving it to Jesus? And that's not to shame you. That's to sober you to the reality of it, is that for me in my life, and I can only speak about me, and my life is my first inclination is not to bring it to Jesus. It's to manipulate it, control it, figure it out. And then I figure out plan A, B, C, and D. Anybody else? And my wife's like, why are you so worried about that? And I'm like, well, if we need plan D, won't you be happy that I already thought it through? How much time have you spent giving it to Jesus and trusting him with that? Man, this father and his boy, and I sat in this and thinking about my own kids, like if they were dealing with something that I couldn't stop, I couldn't help, and you're just all out of options, what would you do? How would you feel in that moment? Look at verse 20. And so they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell on the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Fire and water are two things that are just vital to life next to the Sea of Galilee. Every meal, every laundry, every outing just became a source of panic for this family. How long has he been like this? From childhood. I mean, just imagine. Put yourself in this parent's shoes. Think about everything that they've lost because of this, the peace in their home, the freedom to go places without wondering if something was going to happen, the ability to just let their son play without having to watch every moment. There's an area of this family's life that hasn't been impacted and touched by this impure spirit. It could sit around the fire without watching him. So dinners and meals just become so difficult. They couldn't walk near the water without being afraid. They couldn't go through an ordinary day without wondering when it would happen again. This isn't the life they wanted. It's not the life I'm sure they asked for, and they didn't sign up for it. They'd been robbed. Does life ever feel like that for you? You ever feel robbed of what you thought would happen, what you hoped would happen? Maybe some of you are looking at a marriage or maybe a failed marriage, and you said, man, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Can you imagine when it first started, the happy life that you would build, and now you look at it and you go, oh, that person. You thought there'd be more joy or intimacy or understanding, but somewhere along the way the hurt settled in and it grew and the distance grew. And now you barely recognize the relationship that you once hoped you would have. There's others of you in here, and you look at your children, and you look at what they're carrying, and you think, man, this isn't what I wanted for them. I wanted to protect them. I wanted to give them a good life. But now I'm watching them struggle with anxiety and addiction and disappointment and rejection and choices they made that just seem out of control, and there's nothing I can do. I am helpless. This is impossible. And I think one of the hardest things about being a parent is realizing you can't fix everything that your child is facing. And there's others of you who are looking at your career and your jobs, and you're thinking, man, I thought I'd be further along by now. I've worked hard. And so you've tried to make good decisions, and the opportunity never came, and you got looked over, and the business didn't turn out the way you had hoped, and the job that once gave you a sense of purpose now only leaves you exhausted. And so you look at your health and your finances and your family, maybe to your future that you thought you were building, and somewhere along the way, something has been taken from you. Somewhere along the way, you begin to feel like you've been robbed for the life that you thought you were going to have. And so you say, I didn't plan for this, I didn't ask for this, and I didn't sign up for this. And when you carry things like that long enough, it changes the way you hope, doesn't it? It changes the way you pray. It changes what you believe is possible. And church, can I remind you right now that even a groan is still a prayer? It can still be a prayer. That God is not limited by your feeble attempt at words. Bring the impossible to Jesus. And so maybe all of that combined is why the Father looks at Jesus and says, if you can. Look at verse 23. And Jesus says, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. And immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. I love this. That everything is possible for one who believes. So Jesus isn't saying that faith gives us the power to make anything happen. That's not what this is. I am not good at basketball, right? No matter how hard I try, I will never be LeBron James, ever, right? So it's not just I can do all things. It's all things become possible. Not all things become easy. Everything is possible for one who believes. We're talking about when we bring things to Jesus, the impossible starts to become possible. So again, this isn't believing hard enough, speaking positively enough into the universe, or convincing yourself that everything will work out exactly how you want. The power for this is not in the Father's faith. He lacks it. The power is actually standing right in front of him. It's a lightning man, and he doesn't even know it. He doesn't understand who's standing right in front of him. And so Jesus isn't challenging his faith. He's challenging where he's placed his limits. If you can. And Jesus turns it back towards him. No. Everything's possible when you believe. So the question is whether or not Jesus has the power. The question is whether or not the Father's willing to trust. And immediately the Father says this. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. I imagine he just blurts that out without even thinking. Help is right there. And he said, I do believe, I do. But man, help me with my unbelief. Oh man, please. I do believe. This brutal honesty that he comes to Jesus with. He doesn't pretend that his faith is stronger than he is, or that he has to clean it up to get the right answer. He doesn't give Jesus the church answer that he thinks he's supposed to give. He just says, I believe, but here's where I'm struggling. I trust you, but I'm scared to hope again. I brought you my son, but I've also carried this for a long time like he has, and I don't know what to expect anymore. So help my unbelief. There's faith in him, but it's not perfect. But Jesus doesn't turn him away. You see, Jesus does not require perfect faith. Jesus doesn't require perfect faith. Because some of us think, and we make the mistake that we think if we get rid of every question, every doubt that we have, we need to do that in order to come to Jesus, because somehow Jesus can't handle our questioning. So we think, I just have to stop being afraid. I have to stop doubting. I have to become completely confident before he'll even listen to me. But this Father shows us that we can bring our belief, the little bit that we have, with our doubt, and Jesus can handle it. Jesus can handle it. So you can say, Jesus, I believe you're good, but I don't understand what you're doing. Jesus, I believe you're with me right now, but man, I feel alone. Jesus, I believe you can help me, but I've been disappointed so many times, I'm afraid to hope again. Church, the good news is Jesus doesn't require you to pretend. He'll take it all. That if he can walk the way of the cross and be nailed to a cross and suffer and die, he can handle any doubt that you have, any concern that you have, any struggle that you're going through. He can handle it all. How do we know that? Not just because he's dead on the cross, but because he was resurrected and he lives again. He conquered the biggest thing that any of us will face, the death of us. Someday we will all face that death, but because of him we have new life, resurrection. This is how we know. Jesus doesn't require perfect faith. He asks you to bring what faith you have, even if it's so small you can barely see it. Even if that faith is mixed with fear or questions or unbelief, he takes it all. And watch what Jesus does with the Father's imperfect faith. Verse 25. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. And the boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. Jesus doesn't give the Father a lecture. He doesn't tell him to come back when his faith is stronger. He doesn't ask him to prove how much he actually believes. Jesus just takes control of the situation. He speaks directly to the Spirit. Come out and don't ever come back. And the spirit screams and throws the boy into another violent convulsion. But he comes out, and the boy's just laying there. So much, and Mark tells us he looks like he's dead. And I love this because Jesus took him by the hand. He actually says he resurrected him. He pulled him up. He arose him. And he lifts him up. There you go. All right, little boy. Here you go. And now the boy is standing, and the Father, I'm sure, embraced him immediately. Jesus had done what the Father could not do and what the disciples couldn't do. Now put yourself for a second in the disciples' shoes. How confused are you right now? You've cast out demons before. Mark chapter 6, Jesus sends them out 2 by 2. And he gives them power to cast out impure spirits and to heal people. And he gives them some orders and code. And I just imagine they went out and they did that and they came back and told all these great stories. Like they know how to do this. They've done it before. You've preached, you've healed, you've driven out demons. This isn't your first day. This isn't your first rodeo. They had experience. They'd seen it work. But now this time, nothing happened. And this time it was pretty public. The religious leaders are watching. People are watching. This is embarrassing. And then Jesus just walks up, says one sentence, and demon comes out. What gives? And so they asked Jesus privately. They get away from the crowd, verse 28. And after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? I think that's a fair question. Why didn't it work? What changed? Was the demon stronger than the others? Did they use the wrong words? Did they forget a step? They need more practice. They had the experience, they had the ability, they had a history of success, but they still had a problem. What was that problem? Verse 29, he replied, this kind can only come out through prayer. This kind can come out only by prayer. This kind can come out only by prayer. Are we to assume they didn't even pray? They had all this gifting, all this power. Jesus had given them a history of success, this track record of doing it, and then they come to the situation, and Jesus is the only one who can do it because they didn't pray. Their experience gave them confidence. Their confidence potentially became self-reliance, and so they walked into the situation thinking, we've done this before, I've got this. Church, don't miss this. This is why your greatest strength will always be your greatest weakness. It's your greatest enemy is your own strength. The areas in your life where you excel and you shine. Because let me ask you, those areas, when's the last time you had to pray to do your job well? When's the last time you had to ask God to help you just do what you're gifted at? I'm reminded of this every time I come to preach or even lead worship. I'm gifted at that. I can do this without prayer. Do I want to do it without prayer? No. But the temptation is just to do it without Jesus, that I can exercise the gift and forget about the gift giver. Church, your gifting may be different, completely different. You'll never lead worship. That would give you anxiety and you'd throw up, all right? You would, Cindy knows, you would die if I asked you to come up and deliver a sermon, even your testimony. That's never going to be you. But if there are things you go to a 9 to 5 or whatever work you do, and you are so good at it, you don't have to stop. You went to school, you've done it for years, you know exactly what you're doing, and everybody looks at you for answers around whatever it is. You are the boss, some of you. And you say, I know what's going on. You don't have to pray about that. It's your greatest strength. But church, can I tell you that if you leave Jesus out of that and forget where that gift came from, it will be your greatest weakness, your greatest enemy. The disciples could walk in there and say, we've got this. We've done this before. And they forget that they still are completely dependent on Jesus. Your weaknesses usually keep you close to Jesus. And it's only when you know you can't handle something that you pray. Only when you have to deal with a difficult student or a client or a customer or whatever it is that you do in your job, a coworker, right? Whenever you have to deal with them, that's when you're praying. And usually it's, Lord, don't you hate them too, right? I've said those prayers, come on. Worked customer service for years, I know. But it's in the areas that I'm strong that say, I know what I'm doing, I've got this. And the disciples weren't defeated because they didn't have experience. They were defeated because they trusted their experience. Your enemy is the thing that you are convinced you can do without Jesus. So just try harder and you'll be okay. I was trying to think of times in my life where I've tried harder and just looked foolish. And one time was living out on the ranch. We were out in the desert, Southern California. We had a classic restored 1988 Jeep Wrangler. It was bright like Tweety Bird yellow, huge tires. You'd almost split your pants trying to get into the cab of it. And we would like time trial race this thing around the fire break of the road that would go all the way around. The problem is part of that was shared with the Navy next door for their SEER school. They did not like that we were doing like 65 miles an hour on a gravel road through their property. And they would call and let us know their disdain for us. But sorry, we'll wait another month before we do it again. But I would drive this, and one time I was with a guy, and guys get together, and we're like, there was a creek bed that had all dried out, and we're like, we'll go down the creek bed and back up the other side. No, we would not. Just took it down and just bottomed out. And you're just trying to push it, and all you're doing is kicking up dust and dirt and pebbles and just sinking it down. And what once you'd split your pants trying to get in was now buried all the way down in the creek bed. You look pretty dumb, right? I tried harder and you couldn't get it out. I just buried myself in all the more. Anybody ever done that in your life? You try harder and now you're just deeper in. We had to go get the skid steer to winch it up to pull it out. You know how embarrassing that is? You're just saying, I'm supposed to be in charge and I did this, right? I meant to do that. I meant to bury it. I just wanted to see if we could do it. The more I pushed the gas, the deeper I went. I had the power. I had the engine to do it. And some of you are the same way in your life. You're stuck. And so you push harder, you work longer, try to take more control, and you keep using the very strength that got you that far to get out of it, but you just are sinking deeper. And this is why Jesus points the disciples to something greater than themselves, points them to prayer. It's not trying harder, it's trusting Jesus more fully. Jesus didn't say to the disciples, well, some you just need to try harder. Some you need to say this word first, you need to figure that out. Wouldn't that be nice? I'd have a blueprint, step by step, of how to do these things. Prayer is what strength does when it finally admits I'm not enough. Prayer is not weakness. Prayer is an admission of where your strength actually comes from. And strength is found in honest, helpless, hopeful, specific, and passionate prayer. Strength is found in honest, helpless, hopeful, specific, and passionate prayer. His prayer was honest. The Father's prayer was honest. I believe, but help my unbelief. He didn't pretend that he had everything together and that everything was certain. He didn't hide the part of him that was afraid to hope again. He told Jesus about the truth about where he was. I believe, but help my unbelief. And some of us think that the prayer is supposed to sound super spiritual so that God will hear it. And if we use the right words, then God will hear it. Church, that is not prayer, that is witchcraft. That God will be inclined to do what I said because I said it the right way. See, prayer isn't a place to be good. Prayer's a place to be honest. Jesus, I believe, but I'm struggling. I'm afraid. Jesus, I know you're good, but I don't understand this. Honest prayers. Prayer is also helpless. Father had reached the end of what he could do. He couldn't free his son. The disciples couldn't help him. He couldn't fix the unbelief in his own heart. And so he asked Jesus to do what he could not. He was helpless. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom. Helpless prayer says, Jesus, I can't fix my marriage. I can't control the choices that my children are making. I can't guarantee what will happen with my health or my job or my future. And I can't control my heart without you. His prayer was also hopeful. He had doubts, but he still brought his son to Jesus. He still asked for help. And somewhere underneath all the disappointment, there was enough hope left to believe in Jesus that he might be able to do what no one else could do. Hope doesn't mean we're certain of how the story will end. Hope means you believe that Jesus is still worth coming to. And when you come to Jesus, you come with a specific prayer. His prayer was specific, a request. He didn't say, Jesus, bless us. He said, help my unbelief. Help me. And some of you, your prayer may be, help me forgive. Help me stop trying to control everything. Help me to trust you with my child and my marriage and my job. Jesus, help me believe that you haven't forgotten about me. And we see that prayer was passionate. And Mark says the father immediately cries out. This wasn't a polished speech. He didn't have it all together. He had nothing to hide and nowhere else to go. So he was honest and helpless and hopeful and specific and passionate. This isn't a prayer of somebody that has it all together. It's a prayer of someone who finally understands where the power comes from. The disciples had the strength, they had the experience, they had the confidence, but they didn't have prayer. The father had doubt and fear and desperation, but he cries out to Jesus. And Jesus responds. Church, if you forget everything else I said during this message, will you remember that real strength is not pretending that you can handle everything. Real strength is knowing that you can go to Jesus with everything that you're facing. And prayer is when we stop pushing that gas pedal and burying that Jeep in that creek bed, only digging ourselves deeper. It moves from, I've got this, to, I don't got this, I need you. Because your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, your greatest enemy, because it convinces you that you can live a life without depending on Jesus. And so, church, where do you find yourself today? You find yourself relying on your own strength a lot and trusting that the past would help determine the future? Or have you reached the end of where you are and you're hurting and your brokenness and you say, I've had enough, and Jesus, I just need you? This morning, as we close, as we consider that question, would you just have an honest prayer? Would you have an honest moment? Not a place to be good, but a place to be honest in prayer. I'm frustrated. I'm broken. I'm hurt. I'm angry. And I don't know what to do with this, Jesus. I believe, but help my unbelief. Would you have that conversation before you leave this place? And if that's you, would you talk to me or Jeremy after the service? We've got time. We want to hear. We want to be there for you. Church, would you pray with me? Jesus, we thank you. But we don't have it all together. We don't have it all figured out. But man, we need you. And we thank you that you are there for us. So Jesus, help us to not forget that in the midst of our strength, that we still need you. We need to come to you with prayer, with honest prayers. Help us to bring the impossible to you and to trust you for the first time or maybe again. So give this all to you, Jesus. Amen.